Okay, chapter 3. We got a new mic. Hopefully, it sounds a little bit louder. It seemed a little quiet before. Um, or a different microphone, I should say. Not new. We're using, I don't know what it is. Okay, I guess. All right. No one here gets out alive. Now, Jim Morrison has finally gone through his childhood. He's gone through his college. And now he's just met Ray Manzarek. And hopefully the book will move on to the middle of the 60s Sunset Strip and get a little bit more interesting. So far, it's been pretty bad. Jim Morrison's kind of a jerk. And, it's sort of a pseudo-intellectual type. And hopefully picks up. Okay, part 2. The arrow flies. Just looking ahead, how long is this going to be? It's a little hard to say. It's got some pictures. It's long. It'd be about the same as the others. I don't want to say it out loud. It's so depressing. Oh, okay. Chapter 3. Do you know what we ought to do? Jim was stretched out on a bed, staring at the ceiling. He was using a voice his friends knew well, a perplexing amalgam of boorish jest and vague taunt that left the listener wondering if he was serious or jiving. Sometimes Jim used this voice to disguise his vicious teasing. Other times, as now with his friend from Florida State University, Sam Kilman, who had appeared in L.A. soon after classes ended, he used it to cover his doubts about a suggestion he was going to make. It lessened the risk factor for him. Whatever. No, said Jim. What? Start a rock group, Jim said, still looking at the ceiling. Shit, man, I haven't played drums in 7 years. And what are you going to do? Jim sat up. I'm going to sing. He almost hummed the words. I'm gonna sing. Sam looked at Jim incredulously. Can you sing? He asked. Fuck no, I can't sing, Jim barked. Well, okay then, Jim. Say we got this rock group started and say you could sing, which you can't. What are we going to call it? The Doors. There's the known and there's the unknown. And what separates the two is the door. And that's what I want to be. I want to be the door. John DeBella and Phil Eleno had gone to Mexico. Dennis Jacob and Felix Venable stayed in Venice. Jim considered moving to New York, but remained in West Los Angeles for a few weeks, looking for a job with Sam. And then he, too, moved to Venice. Escaped might be a more fitting word, for the move was preceded by a crisis that left him shocked. He reported for his physical on the 14th of July and learned 2 days afterward that he had passed, meaning he had lost his student deferment and was now classified 1A. Jim thought fast. He had lied to the government, saying he was still enrolled in UCLA, but they must have found out. The next day, he went to the registrar's office and put his name down for several courses he never intended to take. Venice was ideal for Jim. The small artistic community was attracting more and more long-hairs, runaways, and artists every day. Bodies covered the beach. Tambourines clanged merrily to the dozens of transistor radios. Dogs chased frisbees. Cross-legged blue jean circles smoked pot. LSD was sold over the counter at the local head shop. Wow, that's before it's illegal. This seems pretty cool, actually. What they're saying there for Venice, and then that would be pretty badass. Listening to transistor radios, smoking pot on the beach.
Good kush.
Yeah, I think it's before the pot was good though, so they could just smoke it all day and get a headache.
Dumb.
Yeah, but the LSD was sold over the counter. That would last a long time. San Francisco had hate. Los Angeles had Venice. The time of the hippie was just beginning. Jim was one of the anonymous drifters in long hair, t-shirt, and jeans. He lived with Dennis Jacob for a while in a shack on the edge of a polluted canal, and then moved on to an empty warehouse rooftop. There he had a candle for light, a Bunsen burner to warm his occasional canned meals, and a blanket to keep warm. He rarely slept or ate, except to gobble the good acid that was soaking the beach community. Ah, filling. He began to write, creating in a single flare of enlightenment
I
more...
left you a pack of cigarettes on the dining room table.
Yeah. What am I going to have for dinner? Begin to write, creating in a single flare of enlightenment more material in less time than he ever would again. Yeah, that's the thing, is he's not very disciplined. You see, he said, the birth of rock and roll coincided with my adolescence, my coming into awareness.
It's all about Jim.
It was a real turn on, although at the time I could never allow myself to rationally fantasize about ever doing it myself. I guess all that time I was unconsciously accumulating inclination and nerve. My subconscious had prepared the whole thing. I didn't think about it. It was just thought about. I heard a whole concert situation with the band and singing and an audience, a large audience. Those first 5 or 6 songs I wrote, I was just taking notes at a fantastic rock concert that was going on inside my head. Dude, that's not special. Every, adolescent, I guess, boy, maybe girls too, has that thing. Did you ever fantasize about being a rock star?
I am one.
Okay.
You don't need to fantasize.
Though what was about to happen to Jim was in no way preconceived. He was conscious of the music ringing in his inner ear, begging to be released. Actually, I think the music came to my mind first, and then I made up the words to hang on to the melody, some kind of sound. I could hear it, and since I had no way of writing it down musically, the only way I could remember it was trying to get words to put to it. And a lot of times I would end up with just the words and couldn't remember the melody. Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name? That's a great one. Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game. That's good. It was 1965, 3 years before the world would hear Hello, I Love You, and Jim was sitting in Venice on the beach sand watching a young, long, thin, black girl insinuate her way toward him. Sidewalk crouches at her feet like a dog that begs for something sweet. Do you hope to make her see you, fool? Do you hope to pluck this dusky jewel? I'll take it. It's not bad. For Into the Night, he took his inspiration from a novel by the French Nazi apologist and adamantine pessimist Louis Ferdinand Céline, Journey to the End of the Night. Take the Highway from the End of the Night. A third song, Soul Kitchen, was dedicated to Olivia's, a small soul food restaurant near the Venice Arcade, where Jim could get a big plate of short ribs, beans, and cornbread for 85 cents. Fill it up, Tony. And a steak dinner for $1.25. Still another, My Eyes Have Seen You, included a description of all the TV antennas Jim saw from the rooftop, gazing on a city under television skies. However obvious the inspiration for these songs, they were not ordinary. Even the simplest of them had an enigmatic and visionary twist, a rhythm or line or image that gave the verses a peculiar strength. As when he inserted the lines, faces look ugly when you're alone, and people are strange. And in the song about Olivia's, there was this verse, your fingers weave quick minarets, speaking secret alphabets. I light another cigarette, learn to forget, learn to forget, learn to forget. Those are good songs. That stuff's kind of legit. That first record's good. The first song poems were shot through with darkness. With the darkness Jim was so attracted to, felt so much a part of. Visions of death and insanity were expressed frighteningly, with compulsion, in one that later became part of a longer work. The Celebration of the Lizard, Jim wrote, once I had a little game I like to crawl back in my brain. I think you know the game I mean. I mean the game called Go Insane. In Moonlight Drive, an otherwise pleasant love song with abundant imagery so strong it acted on the senses more like a painting than a poem, Jim wrote the surprising ending. Come on, baby, gonna take a little ride down, down, down to the ocean side. If we go, get real tight, baby, gonna drown tonight. Go down, down, down. Once he had written the songs, Jim said, I had to sing them. In August, he got his chance when he encountered Ray Manzarek walking along the Venice beach. Oh, there we go. Hey, man. Hey, Ray. How you doing? Okay, I thought you were going to New York, or I thought you went to New York. No, I stayed here, living with Dennis on and off, writing. Writing? What you been writing? Oh, not much, Jim said. Just some songs. Songs? Ray asked. Let's hear 'em. Jim squatted down in the sand. Ray kneeled in front of him. Jim balanced himself with a hand to either side, squeezing the sand through his fingers, eyes clamped shut. He chose the verse from Moonlight Drive. The words were slow and careful. Let's swim to the moon. Let's climb through the tide, penetrate the evening that the city sleeps to hide. When he finished, Ray said, those are the greatest fucking song lyrics I've ever heard. Let's start a rock and roll band and make $1 million.
Ever?
I don't know. At the time, I mean, you know,
This is 1964.
probably about, and like, keep in mind that rock music hadn't,
Swear to God, I just saw the date somewhere.
yeah, but I mean, there was folk music was out, and there was, heavy lyrics and stuff, but for what they're talking about, like stuff that was going to be popular with kids, he's sort of the guy that brings this sense of poetry and literacy to this specific field. This genre is sort of commercial AM way. I think that's what they're talking about when they're saying they're going to make $1 million. They're not saying we're going to make the greatest record. We're going to make $1 million. They're kind of latching on to a hook.
Beatles started in 1960, so there were probably in those 4 years some better lyrics. In fact, before that, because they were writing before that.
There's different lyrics, but the thing is that these guys are kind of acid heads, and this is sort of
Well, technically, so were the Beatles at some point.
Yeah, but not in 1964. They weren't.
You don't know that for sure.
I'm pretty sure.
You don't know that for sure.
I suppose, but I mean, they were still writing. They were starting in with like "Help" and stuff. I think in '65, but right there in '64, there, I want to hold your hand.
I want to hold your. That's better
Right,
than that.
and Jim's saying, "Yeah." I mean, it's different. It's just really different. It's pretty original, and I think that I think it's genuine when he's saying those are the greatest. Like, it's filling a need. It's filling a void. Well, anyway, there was an angularity to Ray, what is commonly called the raw-boned look. Okay. All right, so there was an angularity to Ray, what is commonly called the raw-boned look. Have you ever heard of that, the raw-boned look? I don't know neither.
Raw-boned?
He was a half inch over 6 feet and slim, weighing about 160 pounds, but the shoulders were unusually broad. The jaw was hard and rectangular, the eyeglasses rimless, cold, and intellectual. If he had believed in Hollywood casting cliches, he might have cast himself as what he had recently been, a graduate student who takes himself seriously, or perhaps a stern young schoolmaster in a Kansas frontier town. But there was a softness too. The box-like chin line had a dimple in it, and his voice was always controlled, gracious, and reassuring. Ray liked to think of himself as potentially everyone's big brother, organized, intelligent, mature, wise, capable of great compassion, and able to accept great responsibility. That's all pretty cool stuff. He was 4 years older than Jim, born in Chicago in 1939, the son of working-class parents. After studying classical piano at the local conservatory and earning a bachelor's degree in economics from DePaul University, Ray enrolled in the UCLA Law School. 2 weeks later, he dropped out to take a management trainee's position at a branch of the Westwood Bank of America, a job he kept for 3 months before returning to UCLA, this time as a graduate student in the cinematography department. A broken romance ended that in December 1961 when Ray enlisted in the Army. Although his duty assignment was a soft one, playing piano in an inter-service band in Okinawa and Thailand, where he was turned on to grass, Ray wanted out, so he told the post-psychiatrist he thought he might be turning gay. He was released a year earlier and returned to the UCLA He was released a year early and returned to the UCLA Film School the same time Jim arrived.
He looks cooler.
He is cool. Like and he's the guy that produced both of those X records, the first two, which I love. I don't know, those are really good. Ray met through John DeBea, and Ray met Jim through John DeBea, and Ray began producing films of exceptional quality, all of them autobiographical, all in praise of the sensuality of his Japanese-American girlfriend, Dorothy Fujikawa.
Yoko Ono.
In one of these, called Evergreen, there was a scene that seemed inspired by the repeated cuts between a boy and a girl running in slow motion toward each other.
I actually don't know if Yoko Ono's Japanese-American.
And had Ray and Dorothy finally meeting nude in a shower. The faculty wanted Ray to edit that scene, and he agreed.
Is that
I don't think so.
No, they mentioned...
But I think it's a different movie.
Version.
Yeah. When several students criticized him for waffling, he went back on his agreement and distributed a flyer at the student screening in December explaining why the film wasn't being shown. Eventually, that film and all the others Ray made would be shown and praised. In June, when he received his master's degree, Colin Young, the division head, said Ray was one of the few students that year who were ready to go on to feature-length films. Even Newsweek magazine recognized Ray's early accomplishments. Ray met Jim through John DeBea, and within a short time they became fairly good friends, and never truly close, but sharing...
Don't hit his head.
Okay. That sharing an intellectualism and a naive Nietzschean philosophy, in many ways they were opposites. Ray would never forget to shave, and the creases in his chinos were always sharp. Jim was deliberately slovenly, given to sandy t-shirts and jeans, and when it was cool at night, he wore a grimy welder's jacket he'd picked up at a surplus store. Ray had familiarized himself with Eastern thought, and in 1965 was beginning to study the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's Transcendental Meditation.
What?
Well, Jim turned his back on that.
Jim looks like an actual serial killer in that photo. And he looks like that famous shot of Bigfoot.
He does. He does look like Bigfoot.
It's the way he's walking in his face.
Let's him go. Sorry, I'm here. Let me get that.
You're a comedy genius.
Yeah, that's pretty good, huh?
He looks like a serial killer / Bigfoot in that photo, though.
Yeah, he does have the look of somebody who's taking a little bit too much over-the-counter acid, for sure. I mean,
well, yeah,
oh yeah,
LSD.
But look at that outline in his pants. You see that?
No, that's funny.
Yeah. Gee whiz. Actually, I've heard that too. Like that, there's a lot of there's plaster casters. Apparently, they said him and Jimi Hendrix had the biggest joints.
What about Keith Partridge?
Old Donk.
David Cassidy.
Old Donk. That was his name, Old Donk. If you read that, Come On, Get Happy or something like that.
Make you happy.
Maybe we should read Come On, Get Happy next, that
Make
Partridge
you
Family book.
happy.
All right, anyway, Ray was a practicing aesthete, while Jim reveled, sometimes wallowed in the Dionysian. But still, they were mutually attracted, and when they met on the Venice beach, Ray asked Jim to move in with him. He could sleep on the living room couch, and they could work on the songs during the day when Dorothy was at work. Jim moved in immediately, and the two began. Jim's voice was weak, but he and Ray agreed that was largely a matter of confidence, which would come with practice. They worked on the songs for 2 weeks solid. Ray at the piano in his small, funky apartment, Jim nervously holding the lyrics for security, although he knew them all, standing stiff and motionless, wishing the moth he was sure was stuck in his throat would go away. Then Ray took Jim to his parents' house, where Rick and the Ravens rehearsed. Jim's lyrics sailed over Ray's brothers' heads. Obviously, Rick and Jim Manzarek didn't understand Jim or his lyrics, though they agreed to try working with him. Other people didn't understand Jim either. When Ray bumped into two of their former film school buddies and announced he had started a band with Jim, they were shocked. You're in a band with Morrison? For God's sakes, Ray, why would you want to go and do something like that?
Honestly.
Jim was still, no doubt, dude. Jim was still regarded as an extravagant, albeit intelligent flake. Many classmates didn't give any band.
Isn't he precious?
Yes, band Morrison was in one chance in a million to make it. Ray remained loyal, seeing in Jim something few others did, something Jim himself was only beginning to recognize. The most evident change was physical. Jim was gone from 165 to 130 pounds and had lost his characteristic plumpness. Now he was lean.
How much? 130?
Yeah.
That's like 5 pounds over me.
Yeah, he's skinny. Now he was lean and sinuous. With this new physique was longer hair, spouting over the ears and curling past the collar, framing a face that had lost all puffiness and become positively handsome. The transformation was radical. That is not this.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I guess that's him in a way, but his face... Well, that's in 66. Well, his legs look skinny. Anyway, whatever. But the most important difference was in what Jim felt. A delirious, humming confidence, an otherworldly magnetism that seemed to pull everything he needed his way. Shortly after Jim met Ray's family, the brothers Manzarek and he moved their rehearsals into a house behind the Greyhound bus station in Santa Monica, where they added a new drummer, John Densmore, whom Ray had found in his meditation class. John had much in common with Jim. Both had solid middle-class backgrounds. John's father was an architect. Both had a brother and a sister. In high school, both had shown an aptitude for a minor sport. For John, it was tennis. Jim had excelled in swimming. With Ray, John shared an excitement for jazz.
I thought Jim was bad at swimming.
I don't know. I don't really remember. I mean, Daddy tried hard. John shared an excitement for jazz, along with
his friend that was bad at swimming. I can't remember.
Yeah. Along with the avidity and dedication of a new convert to the yogic disciplines of the Maharishi. John told Ray and Jim that he had a fiery temper and hoped the meditation would help him learn to control it. He was 20 and still living at home, which made him an immediate target of Jim's ridicule. Though he was aching to break away from his parents, longing for the liberation a working band might bring. In the years to come, Jim and John would work together in the Doors, but never became close as friends.
That's the drummer?
Yeah. This guy.
Yeah.
John Densmore. Yeah, he seems kind of like a footnote. A little bit. I'm not sure, though. And we'll see, I guess. But the Robbie Krieger guy seems a little bit more in tune. John had been playing the drums since the age of 12. He had played a timpani snare in University High School in West Los Angeles, then switched to jazz during college. This is another guy that went to the same high school as Gabe, Uni High. Which he had, I guess like a million people did. I don't know why it always interests me.
Populated place.
Which he had started at Santa Monica City, going next to Los Angeles City, finally dropping out of San Fernando Valley State. After 2 weeks of rehearsal, Ray and his brothers drove with their new singer and drummer and a pickup bass player, a girl whose name everyone has forgotten, to the World Pacific Recording Studio.
You're not even going to mention who the girl is?
No, the first bass player is a girl, and
I'm sure that they can somehow figure out her name.
They couldn't remember it.
No, that's really sad.
Wait, it didn't matter.
Oh, of course.
Rick and the Ravens had a contract with Aura Records and had cut a couple of songs with Ray singing as Screaming Ray Daniels. After release, the single had sunk without notice, and Aura decided to give the boys some free studio time instead of recording more songs. In 3 hours, they cut 6 songs. What we got, said Jim years later, was an acetate demo, and we had 3 copies pressed. These were the discs that Jim, Ray, and John, and sometimes Dorothy Fujikawa took from record company to record company. Songs Jim had written in Venice that summer, including Moonlight Drive, My Eyes Have Seen You, a song then called Go Insane, End of the Night, and an innocuous little tune with the perennial theme, Summer's Almost Gone. The songs in the group were rejected by every record company. About this time, Jim met Pamela Courson. Pamela was a redhead, only 18 years old. She had freckles on the back of her hands, smeared across her pale, delicate, fawn-like face, sprinkled like cinnamon on a body the length of a rope. She wore her hair parted in the middle, straight and long. She is like a hippie dream. Right?
I bet there's a better picture. What's your last name?
Courson. Pamela Courson. I think she's the one that was with him when he died. Her eyes were a translucent lavender, larger than most, giving her the look of a painting by Walter.
Bisbee's calling you.
Okay, let's answer it. Hello? Yes. Oh, I'm good. I'm good. Okay, cool. Okay. Okay. Yeah, just leave it apart. It's totally fine. Brian, I got. No. It's okay. I've got another one. I've got another one I'm using. That's just kind of it's a cool one though. So you just want to give me a ring when it comes in or something? Okay. Oh, okay. Cool, dude. All right, that sounds awesome. I got to. Okay.
Hey man, I just saw that they had 2 extra lugs on them.
Yeah.
2 little tabs to side of things. Okay, well that's for the switch. No,
Okay.
they're just 2 grounds. So I got taken.
All right, Brian. That's cool. All right, but buddy, I got to run. I gotta go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
Yeah,
okay. No problem.
Yeah, enjoy your afternoon.
Okay, man. I'll see you really soon. Thanks for calling.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Did you see another picture of her? We should put one up.
Trying.
Okay, so Pamela was a redhead, only 18 years old. She was born December 22nd, 1946 in Weed, California. Oh, yeah, show that. I'll keep reading. A few miles from... Go ahead. Yeah, a few miles... See if you can find a few others to put up while I read. A few miles from Mount Shasta, considered a holy mountain by the Indians. Her father, like Jim's, had been a Navy flyer, but a bombardier, not a pilot, and now was a commander in the U.S. Naval Reserve and principal of a high school in Orange, the town that gave Orange County its name. She told Jim she dropped out of her art classes in Los Angeles City College and was looking for something meaningful to do. You should hold those closer, hon.
Well, I can't get any closer.
Well, screw your chair up. That's a good, I like that. I think that's a good idea. You should show pictures of all the things while I'm reading
I'm
it.
not gonna do that.
No, you should do a little of that. Look at Wendy. He thinks it's a good idea.
Okay.
All right, we're getting bogged down here. Years later, Pam would say it was Jim who told her about life. She called herself Jim's creation. He taught her about the philosophers, writing out a paragraph about each of them, from Plato to Nietzsche.
Jim Morrison is just not that attractive.
Introducing her to the great ideas of the Western mind, Jim gave her his journals to read, and immediately she appointed herself custodian of his poetry. Jim was rereading Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception. Most of these modifiers of consciousness cannot now be taken except under doctor's orders or else illegally and at considerable risk. For unrestricted use, the West has permitted only alcohol and tobacco. All the other chemical doors in the wall are labeled dope, and their unauthorized takers are fiends.
It's not a bad picture.
Jim was amused at the representation and began to increase both the variety and quantity. Jim was doing everything and anything to blow his mind, open the doors of perception, break on through to the other side, and take the highway to the end of the night. Visit weird scenes inside the gold mine, ride the snake. The striking phrases that he would later scatter through his songs were being written in notebooks on the warm autumnal beach. He was in the rush of discovery of his particular vision and vocabulary. He gobbled acid tabs like beer nuts or aspirin, for that's what they now look like. Early Owsley from San Francisco, the original White Lightning, pure and cheap and clunk. And grass, of course, bags and bags from Mexico. And then the sugar cubes. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Jim decided it was time to tell his family in London of his plans. He wrote that he had tried to find work after graduation, but people had laughed at his cinematography degree. So now he was in a group and singing, and what did they think of that? What do you think his parents thought?
Of what was he
That
doing?
he wrote to them saying that he was in a group and singing. What did they think of that? What do you think his parents thought?
Probably not that good things. Not good things.
Well, Jim's father was stunned and wrote a letter of strong objection.
That's not good.
No. What are you looking at?
I'm looking at the 27 Club.
Oh, okay. He reminded Jim of the abandoned piano lessons.
He died when he was 22, Buddy Holly.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he was 22.
He's not in it. He reminded Jim of the abandoned piano lessons and his childhood refusal to join his family in Christmas caroling. And now he was starting a band? After his father had paid the bills for 4 years of college? Well, said the fast-rising Navy officer, I think it's a crock. Jim never took criticism lightly, and he never wrote his parents again. Fuck you. Nice. Sometime in October, a picture of Billy James appeared in the trade magazines. Jim and Ray now read weekly. Billy, who was 33 and a one-time actor, had been doing Bob Dylan's publicity in New York after he signed with Columbia. And in 1963, he had moved to California to do publicity there. For a while, he was successful at it, which is to say he satisfied all the usual corporate demands. But then he began to adopt the lifestyle of the musicians, eventually changing so radically that he could no longer communicate with his East Coast friends and nearly all of his superiors at Columbia. So Billy was given a new title, Manager of Talent Acquisition and Development, vague enough to cut across conventional corporate charts. So far as he was concerned, the title was the go-ahead to sniff out the stuff that really appealed to him. Ray and Jim looked at the photograph. Billy wore a beard. Maybe he's hip, said Ray. When Billy returned from lunch, he found Jim, Ray, Dorothy, and John standing in the hallway next to the water cooler outside his office. He nodded absently, told the boys to come in, accepted their acetate graciously, and listened to their rap, which he instantly knew had been delivered many times. He promised them he would call probably in a day or so. 2 days later, Billy's secretary got Jim on the phone. She said Billy wanted to see them in his office as soon as it was convenient. I told them I could produce their records if I wanted to, but that I felt the talent was there. I was not at all sure I could bring it out in the studio, Billy recalls. So I knew I would have to interest another Columbia producer in them because I anticipated that might be a problem. The contract I offered was for 5.5 years with 6 months as the initial term, given which the company agreed to produce a minimum of 4 sides and release a minimum of 2. I didn't want them to be hung up under contract to us beyond 6 months with nothing going on. Jim couldn't believe it. Columbia, Dylan's label. Despite this encouragement, the band began to fall apart. As one of Ray's brothers quit and the other was replaced, the replacement was Robbie Krieger, a guitarist who was in John and Ray's meditation class. At 19, Robbie was the youngest of the 4. He was also the least imposing. He had frizzy, toast brown hair, vague green eyes that gave him a dazed look, which some thought was caused by either drugs or ill-fitting contact lenses. The eccentric image was fostered by the way he talked, hesitantly, as if he were falling asleep. The ends of his sentences drifting up into a question mark or disappearing into a whisper. But appearances can be deceiving. Behind that dazed child's look, there was a quick mind and a subtle sense of humor, both inherited from his father, a modestly wealthy man who advised government agencies and businesses on planning and finances. I gotta pass this to you. Like John.
Like John, Robbie was a native of California, born January 8th, 1946 in Los Angeles, one of the non-identical twins, and he had gone to Uni High. But Robbie had also attended high schools in Pacific Palisades, a rich Los Angeles beach suburb, and in Menlo Park, a toony suburb near San Francisco. He had spent a year at the University of California in Santa Barbara, and then a stretch at UCLA, where he had changed his major for the third time and was studying physics, where John asked him to meet some guys who were calling themselves the Doors. The Doors? Robbie asked, grinning vacantly. Far out. Robbie and John had played together in a group called the Psychedelic Rangers. Until now, he'd thought that that was an unusual name. Robbie told Jim that he began playing guitar at age 15 and 18 was aspiring Montoya or Segovia, but he would change musical styles as often as he changed schools, moving quickly from flamenco to folk to blues to rock. He especially liked the folk people, and he told Jim, recalling the time he went to see Joan Baez at Stanford University. Jim, of course, started talking about Dylan. Then Robbie plugged in his guitar and casually played some Bottleneck. Jim had heard Bottleneck on records, but this was the first time he had seen it done. For a while, he wanted Robbie to play Bottleneck on every song. The shop talk and rehearsals continued, and the four grew closer, meeting every day at Ray's at Robbie's house, where his parents had a piano in the side room, or at a friend's house in Venice. 5 days a week, all afternoon, they rehearsed. They worked an occasional gig on weekends, mostly bar mitzvahs, weddings, fraternity parties, leaning highly on a few easily recognized songs such as Louie Louie and Gloria, and occasionally playing one of their own compositions. Jim, still too shy and insecure to face an audience, no matter how small, turned his back to the dance floor, or when he faced it, closed his eyes and held onto the microphone as if it were all that was keeping him from sinking through the stage. I can't really imagine that. He's so loud and obnoxious. How would he be? Why is he? And he sings just to annoy people. Why would he be shy to actually to sing in front of people?
No, it's not in control.
Yeah, he kind of is. In fact, on most of the Doors' earliest dates, it was Ray who sang most of the songs, with Jim punctuating the verses by honking on the harmonica or grunting "yeah" and "drive on." Phil Eleno had a job as a night manager of a supermarket, and on those rare afternoons when Jim wasn't rehearsing, they were sometimes smoking dope and hanging out on the UCLA campus talking to girls in the art department. One was Katie Miller, who was a year or two younger than Jim and looked something like the young Tuesday Weld, innocent, blonde, ethereal.
Ethereal
is that?
Dreamlike.
Oh. Katie was a sensitive girl, insecure about her capabilities, always preferring her marks with apologies, but it was her generosity that gave her the most pain. It was as if she were trying to be a mother to the strays that she met at school. She invited Jim to stay at her apartment anytime he wanted and cook scrumptious meals, urging him to take her car when he needed transportation. Sometimes Jim would disappear with her car for days, leaving Katie to walk and wander. Other times he stayed at her apartment for days, making a terrible mess and abusing her viciously, castigating her with a satanic tongue, boasting drunkenly of the other women in his life, threatening to take a knife to the huge painting she had done in school and hung on her apartment walls. He also reassured her she was fine. He said she was beautiful. Jim Morrison is the worst.
He's an alcoholic. He's just drunk. He's He's obnoxious when he drinks. That was his thing. That's what did him in.
You really ought to meet
All
Jim, she
acid
told her
and
friend
booze.
Rosanna White, another art student. Rosanna had heard some of the Katie stories and was repelled, but when she finally met Jim, he fascinated her. Often he went without a shirt and with his hair grown out, and the way he turned his head sideways, bunching up the muscles in his neck. Rosanna thought he looked like a Greek statue come to life. No, she was equally gripped by his voice, which never in the 6 months she saw him off and on rose above a whisper. Rosanna admitted to being afraid of Jim, but she still offered her black couch in her apartment, giving him a second place to crash when he didn't make it back to the beach. Rosanna's apartment was as severe as Katie's was lush. She lived on natural food, so there was never much to eat, and because she never smoked marijuana, there was none of the trash food that grass smokers liked. She seldom even drank wine, so Jim had to bring his own. She did have an organic shampoo he liked.
This book is about as square as an episode of Dragnet. And I get the feeling like they think that they're hip. You know what I mean? Like saying like what grass smokers like, the junk food grass smokers like, Cheetos and stuff. You see those. Look at the orange fingers. You know you got a pothead.
Okay, thank you. She did have an organic shampoo he liked, however, and often when Rosanna returned from class, she found him in the bathroom in his jeans and a ratty pajama top he wore, posing in front of the mirror, sucking in his cheeks like a fashion model with the haunting Hungry Vogue magazine look, preening his still damp, uncombed hair. "Jim," she said, "why don't you brush your hair?" Jim gave his hair a final pat and looked at Rosanna in an almost a caricature of sexiness. Because I wanted to look like a bird's wing. Then he caressed himself, folding his arms across his chest to rub his biceps sensually with a thin flannel covering, staring at her putility. I don't know. But that's also, again, he's really weird.
Petulantly.
Petulantly. He's the weirdest person ever. Not like a good weird. Like, he's just weird and needs to stop. One night, not long after she met Jim, he appeared at her apartment with John Densmore and Katie, both of whom soon left, leaving her and Jim alone. Rosanna, who had been increasingly annoyed by Jim's preening and whispering, decided to get things off her chest. "What is this bullshit?" she said when Jim began to whisper at her. "You don't really talk like that now. Talk that way. Now stop it." Jim turned his whisper into a greasy proposition, telling Rosanna what she really wanted was to go to bed with him. "Oh, come on, Jim," she said, sounding disgusted. "Don't be such a goddamn phony. You're stoned all the time. I can't relate to you. I can't even talk to you now because I think you're stoned and you're phony. Jim, you're putting on an act." Jim rushed into the kitchen and in seconds returned to Rosanna's curved carbon steel carving knife. Of course he did. Of course he ran to the kitchen to get a knife. Standing in front of her, he grabbed her right wrist and bent her arm behind her in a hammerlock. Her blouse came unbuttoned in the movement, and Jim put the blade into the flesh of her soft stomach. Why was he not arrested on so many occasions? Jesus Christ. "You can't say that to me," he whispered. "I'm going to cut you and see if you bleed." He sounded serious. Someone entered the apartment. Jim spun around and saw John Densmore returning unexpectedly. He looked back at Rosanna and then down at the knife he held. He laughed. "Hey, now, what's this? A knife? Now, where did that come from?" Afterward, Rosanna apologized, and then Jim apologized. Rosanna doesn't need to apologize. Asking if he could sleep on her couch that night. She said yes. If I was Rosanna, I would have, if not tried to murder him myself, would have kicked him out of the house and called the police. Sometime in November, Jim called Ray.
Good for you. I'm glad to hear it.
It was 8 a.m. and Jim was peaking on acid. He wanted to get together to rehearse. Ray said it was too early. Jim insisted. Said if Ray didn't come over right away, that was it. To hell with the Doors. He was quitting. Ray told Jim he'd see him later. Good for Ray to not take any of this bullshit. Several hours passed and Jim was at Phil Eleno's house. That's like that line when Ferris Bueller's Day Off when he's on the phone with Cameron and he says, "If you're not over here in 15 minutes, you can find a new best friend." And Cameron says, "You've been saying that to me since the 5th grade." Several hours passed, and Jim was at Phil Eleno's house with Felix Venable coming down from the effects of the drug. They were talking about some pictures they'd seen on Spiderweb spun under the influence of LSD. LSD and masculine. Elena produced the book. He had taken it from the UCLA library and opened it to the photographs. The web spun by spiders that had been given acid were geometrical, and the masculine webs were arbitrary, chaotic, illogical, perhaps, said Jim, insane. They decided they must go sample some masculine in its purest form. Mescaline, the peyote cactus. That meant driving to the desert to Arizona. Oh, I like that they said right here, it says, perhaps, said Jim, in parentheses, as if he didn't actually say this, they're just guessing. He might have, maybe there's a chance he said insane, the word insane. Why would you even mention that? What does that matter to the story? The three headed east to Phil's dilapidated red Chevy convertible.
Dilapidated,
I don't know what that means, red Chevy convertible, which had no first or reverse gears. While driving through Hawthorne, scarcely out of Los Angeles, Jim ordered the car to a noisy halt, leaped out, ran over, and kissed a young girl, dashing back to the car just as a police cruiser noised in front of the Chevy. Okay, isn't Pamela his girlfriend?
Yeah.
I hate Jim Morrison. Jim's whimsical flight had not gone unnoticed. The police asked him for an identification, talked to the girl, and learned she was only 14. Come on, called Jim. Why don't you shoot me? Come on, motherfucker, chicken shit asshole, shoot me. Mysteriously, the police let him go with a warning.
Oh,
The
yeah.
journey to the east resumed.
The force is strong with this one.
I hate him. He's the worst. 2 days later, when Jim and Felix returned without Phil and covered with bruises and cuts, the stories began. Jim told some people that they had driven to Arizona, met some Indians, gone into the... Oh, he would know about that, though, because of the Native American in his soul. He probably got along really well with the Native Americans.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they felt like he was a real kindred spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he showed up, they were like, oh, this is our best traditional peyote.
Yeah.
Please, we're going to do the whole trip with you. Smoke lodge it up. We're going to have fun.
Yeah.
We're really going to break through.
He had gone into the desert with them to shoot a circle of arrows around the peyote cactus, because if you can draw the bow and shoot the arrow, Jim explained, it meant you were strong enough to have a good grip. Then they had chewed the peyote, and afterward Phil decided to head for Mexico. Others were given another version, which explained the bruises. In this one, Jim, Phil, and Felix were never found any Indians, never found any peyote, but found instead some Chicano lowriders who lived near the Colorado River and liked to stomp men with long hair.
On the 26th, we're playing with a Chicano ska band.
Okay. The earliest group publicity photo, never used, 1966.
Ooh, let's see it. That's pretty slick. You know what I think? Put that back up. I think Jim's trying to look like Mick Jagger.
He does look like he's trying to look like Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
Nothing
Good
was
luck,
happening
right?
at Columbia.
That shit's not happening.
The contract had
No
been signed,
comparison.
and there had been a celebration dinner at what's happening? Did I miss a thing? Nothing had happened in Columbia. Where is it? Oh, they went, okay. The contract had been signed, and there had been a celebration dinner at Robbie's house, but after that, nothing. Billy James was finding it impossible to get the attention of Columbia's staff producers. The Doors continued to rehearse, play an occasional party, and an audition wherever they could. In December at UCLA Film School screening that included one of Ray's classroom exercises of the previous year, the Doors appeared on stage. In their first truly public appearance, improvising a soundtrack with acoustical instrument. Acoustical, I'm sorry, that's my B.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Acoustical instruments. Then they auditioned at the club in Westchester, home base for the Turtles, a then popular Los Angeles band, and were rejected. They similarly...
Where did they... What were the Turtles on? Or was that at a show?
It's a show.
Oh.
They similarly were turned away from Bito Litos, the tiny but very hip club in Hollywood where Love had been the house band for so long. The trouble, they were told, was the lack of sufficient bass sound. Okay. Began inviting bass players to rehearsals, but the sound was too full, like that of the Rolling Stones. They played many of the same songs. Or that any electric blues band. They were still trying to decide if they wanted to change their sound that much, still auditioning at the clubs without a basis. When in early January they were offered a job as a house band at the London Fog, a small club on Sunset Strip less than 50 yards from the Whiskey A Go-Go, whose owner bore the unlikely name Jesse James. The Doors watched the banner go up outside. Doors, band from Venice, and they were ecstatic. The first night they played, not a single person entered the club. The owner's terms were so stingy that it seemed that he was trying to get even with them for filling the house with friends from UCLA the night they auditioned. Since the Fog was a non-union club like Bito Littles, the musicians hired hired, didn't have to belong to the musicians' union, and the club didn't pay union minimums. Too many words. The Doors played from 9 to 2, 5 sets a night, with a 15-minute break each hour, 6 nights a week. For this, they were paid $5 each on the weeknights and $10 each on Fridays and Saturdays, in cash at the end of the evening if the owner had it. The proximity of the Whiskey did nothing for the size or makeup of the Doors' early audiences. Despite its trending name, the London Fog was frequented mostly by sailors, deviants, pimps, hookers, and black-suited mafias types.
Mafiosos?
Mafiosia. No.
Mafia types.
Yeah. With the odd puzzled tourist thrown in, all were looking for action that clearly was somewhere else. Will you read?
Yeah. God, I would love to.
The
I
proximity.
would love to go there. That would be great. Which one? The proximity of the Whiskey, we already read that. Between sets, the Doors would take turns walking down the street to the Whiskey, where they'd be allowed to stand in the entranceway and watch the headliners, hoping one day to be, as Jim later put it, as big as Love, then the most popular underground band in Los Angeles. Still, the job encouraged them and gave them the chance to build confidence while they polished their original material. At first, Jim continued to interject himself in the instrumental breaks on harmonica, or picked up the claves, or claves, I'm not sure, while Ray played flute. But as he began to concentrate more on his visual performance, he stopped trying to play an instrument. Ray discovered the Fender keyboard bass, an instrument he could play with his left hand while continuing to strike chords and solo with his right hand on the Vox organ that Columbia Records had bought for him. The bass dilemma was resolved. By February, the band had no less than 40 songs in its repertoire, about 25 of them originals, including The End, which in early 1966 was no more than a nicely written song about faded love. This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend, the end. Of our elaborate plans, the end. Of everything that stands, the end. No safety or surprise, the end. I'll never look into your eyes again. With the exception of Alabama Song, taken from a Brecht Weill musical about the glory and degradation of pre-war Nazi Germany, the rise and fall of Mahogany, the songs the band played were old blues classics or recognized rock hits, such as Money, cool, Backdoor Man, cool, Gloria, cool, Louie Louie, cool. Jim was now singing nearly all of them. As the weeks passed, Jim gained self-assurance. He didn't think he had much of a voice. I don't sing, I shout, he told people, but he knew he was getting much better. While the band loosened up, he would do a dramatic turn with a black handkerchief, draping it over the microphone and rubbing it sensually around his face. Most important to the Doors was their growing sense of oneness. After rehearsing every day and now playing together publicly, the three musicians and singer knew one another's music intimately, and they were getting very good. Ray's assertive, vaguely churchy Flash Gordon organ, John's jazzy drumming, punctuating Jim's lyrics perfectly, Robbie's subtle, seemingly offhanded blues and flamenco finger-picking, Jim's slightly hoarse, uneven, but sensual tenor baritone, all came together in a style that had only been hinted at on the demo disc. Much of the time, Jim still stood with his back to the audience. facing the others, assuming the stance he took in rehearsals, when, according to Ray, they turned inward to direct their energies towards each other. With the help of LSD, Ray says, the Doors developed their communal mind. Most musicians who play together for a time and who respect each other's musicianship feel a closeness non-musicians and non-singers cannot comprehend. Yeah, says Ray, there was that. But there was also an unusual intensity. They had an unusual partnership agreement whereby everything was to be shared equally. Jim was writing nearly all the songs, but when they recorded, he said the Doors would be listed as composer, and royalties and all other income would be divided equally 4 ways. All creative decisions would be made not by majority rule, but by unanimous vote. Jim began to bring his drugs on stage, sometimes internally, eyes dilated, sensory perception alternately distorted and intensified, ego fragmented, other times in his pockets, whipping out an Amy, just as Ray was beginning an organ solo and popping it under his nose. I think that's amyl nitrate. Will you pass me that red pillow? Pretty please, with the cherry on top. Once he popped Amy's for everyone as they began Little Red Rooster. And when they got to the lyric, the dogs began to bark and the hounds began to howl. Ray began barking. John began howling. And Jim fell off the stage. Another night, fucked up on booze, Jim reverted to an odd sort of teenage grossness, improvising new lyrics for Gloria, adding, and then she come on my floor, she come on bed, she come in my mouth. Jim was still without a mailing address, moving from couch to bed to couch. Pamela was his number 1 girl, but he was not a monogamist. They talked about getting an apartment in Laurel Canyon, but at the time he was spending his nights all over West Los Angeles. He still didn't have a car and depended on Ray's ancient yellow Volkswagen or John's Singer Gazelle. I wonder what that is. We look up a Singer Gazelle, Gazelle, Singer Gazelle. When hungry, the Doors would all go to John's house. John's mother being the softest touch among the 3 door mothers available. Oh, yeah, could I see it though? I don't know what they look like. Ooh, shoots. So who did that one? John Densmore drove this. That's pretty cool. That's all right, man. A Singer, huh? I never heard of that.
I wonder what color it was.
I don't know. Those are
like
real cool. By April, the Doors were in a funk. They remained broke. $40 apiece wasn't enough to live on. And once they didn't get that, John had been offered a spot in another band. John and Robbie were arrested for possession of marijuana, and Jim, who had gotten a student deferment illegally the preceding summer, was reclassified 1A and told to report for a new physical in May. Then Columbia put them on the drop list. One of Columbia's staff producers, Larry Marks, came into the London Fog one night, introduced himself as their producer, but they'd never seen him again, nor had they heard anything from Billy James. It was John who noticed the Doors' name on the drop list on Billy's desk. They asked for an immediate release. "Stick it out," said Billy. "You get $1,000 if you finish the 6 months and they haven't cut the songs." They shook their heads. Billy sighed and called someone in the legal department, and the Doors were legally free. A few days later, the owner of the London Fog fully liberated the Doors. He fired them. The group's luck changed in May. First, Jim tampered with his blood pressure. Blood, sugar, heartbeat, respiration, vision, and speech with a varied and plentiful assortment of drugs. Marched into the Army Induction Center for his physical, told the doctors he was a homosexual, and if they took him, they'd be the sorriest motherfuckers on the face of the earth. He was refused for service. Then, on the band's final night at the London Fog...
Who's that? Who's that, Jim?
Yeah.
A lot of telling people that you're homosexuals. Because Ray did that too.
I think you can get out of the service. Don't want to go to Vietnam, right? Then, on the band's final night at the London Fog, the talent booker for the Whiskey A Go-Go appeared to ask them if they were available to fill in Monday night. One night only. The pretty brunette named Ronnie Heron said, but the owners would be watching. I've really talked you up, she told Jim, and we've been kind of looking for a house band. If it worked into a regular job, she said, it would mean 2 sets a night compared to the 4 or 5 of the Fog, 4 union scale. That's $499.50 for the 4 of them. Dude, we didn't... Fuck, man. That's pretty good. Seems to me. Back then? Well, whatever. Well, I guess it's just one night a week. Jim and the others were casual in their response, but inside they were exploding with relief. Yeah, said Jim, I think we can make it Monday, huh? Yeah, that's tomorrow. That's not much notice, you know. The man who made the decisions and was part owner of both PJ's, a lizard lounge just off the strip, and the Whiskey A Go-Go, was a middle 30-ish ex-vice cop from Chicago with a Runyon-esque name of Elmer Valentine. Ronnie Heron, who had met Elmer when she was a starlet hanging out nights at PJ's, was handling the publicity for both clubs and scouting new acts. She also did publicity for the Scottish singer Donovan in 1966, and when she was looking for a photographer, someone had suggested Paul Ferrara, who had gone to UCLA with Jim, and told Ronnie she ought to see the band at the Fog. He was not the first nor the last to tell her about the Doors, and as she relied heavily on what she heard on the street rather than listen to managers, she finally paid the Fog a visit. Elmer admits Ronnie Heron begged him to book the Doors a second time because the first time he thoroughly hated them. He told her he thought Jim was an amateur without potential who affected a far-out pose to cover his lack of talent. He also thought Jim had a filthy mouth, but Elmer liked Ronnie, so he agreed to put the Doors back in for another 2 days. The Doors remained at the Whiskey from mid-May until mid-July, during which time they were fired at least once a week for infuriating the owners. Although the Doors wanted to favorably impress the headliners at the club, the Rascals, the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, the Animals, the Beau Brummels, them, Buffalo Springfield, Captain Beefheart, they also wanted to blow them off the stage, causing Elmer's partner, Phil Tanzini, to scream at them, too loud, I'm going to throw you out in front of everybody. Turn down. In revenge, every time the band played Unhappy Girl, Ray would lean on the highest note until the organ and Tanzini screeched. Jim's antics aggravated the situation. He would sometimes get so wiped out on booze or drugs that he failed to show up. Worst, he would sometimes jump on stage between sets, screaming, fuck Elmer, fuck the whiskey, fuck Phil. It's not too bad. It's a little funny. It's a little
Occasionally
funny.
he's got a good one.
Yeah.
Overall, he's the worst.
Yeah. Whenever the Doors were fired, the way that they're telling the story is kind of funny. It's kind of good. Whenever the Doors were fired, Ronnie Heron called a 14-year-old girl in Beverly Hills, who by now is one of the Doors' biggest fans. She was allowed to stand by the box office, but was not permitted inside, who would get on the phone, call all her girlfriends, and all of whom called the Whiskey to ask when the Doors would be back. Elmer was in the habit of taking a lot of the calls at the club, using them the same way Ronnie used street talk to keep in touch. It was always the same thing, said Elmer's, who still doesn't know he was at least partially conned. The chicks, all asking, is that horny motherfucker in the black pants there tonight? Now, my mother didn't raise any idiot kids, so I kept putting them up as the second group. On the street, the word was, you got to go see the Doors at the Whiskey. The singer is crazy. The Doors' image was blatantly sexual, a skinny singer rubbing his crotch against a microphone stand, but it was also intellectual. The gallery of grotesques in Jim's lyrics fascinated the band's mid-60s constituency. Songs like When the Music's Over were by turns mournful, outraged, consoling, demanding, pleading, and above all, frustrated. The Doors' set was fluid. Once they'd spend 5 minutes between songs, or often they'd spend 5 minutes between songs trying to decide what to play next. How about Crystal Shit? Jim would ask, nah, I don't think so. Ray would say, don't feel like it. John would suggest a song that gave Robbie a long solo, and Robbie would shake his head. When the music's over, said Jim. Ray looked contemplative. widened his mouth into a Henry Fonda no-teeth showing grin and nodded. John said, okay. Robbie said, sure. It was unanimous. Doors policy. When the Music's Over was an improvisational number that ran 11 minutes or more, depending on the length of the instrumental breaks.
That's dumb.
And the scraps of poetry Jim threw in. In many ways, it was the classic Doors song, delivered in a highly dramatic style that insisted the band be regarded in the theatrical as well as musical terms. The song began with a bouncy organ riff, and Jim urging almost under his breath, yay, come on. Okay, this chapter, I don't know how close we are over, but I want to predict.
A couple pages.
Okay, I want to predict right now. This chapter is going to end with they're going to mention Light My Fire and Robbie Krieger's song. I bet you that's what they'll say. Like, at the last sentence of this chapter will be something like, that day Robbie brought a new song to rehearsal. It was called Light My Fire, or something like that. Okay, that's my guess. Okay. Anyway, the song began with a bouncy organ riff and Jim urging almost under his breath, yay, come on. Then John Densmore began exaggeratedly wheeling his arms, adding a loud metronomic drum beat, and suddenly startling everyone. Jim leaped straight into the air with his hand mic.
You misread that. It's not yay, come on. It's yay, come on.
Yay, come on. Come on. That's how you do it. Come on. The organ carried the melody line, Robbie adding accents, and Jim crooned a fatalistic lament. When the music's over, when the music's over, turn out the lights, turn out the lights, turn out the lights. Then more forcefully, for the music is your special friend. And still more assertively, almost a shout, dance on fire as it intends. Then a consolation and warning. Music is your only friend. The drums rattled. Until the end. Until the end. Until the end. Here Robbie provided feedback, freak out, psychedelic guitar. John slammed away on the cymbals. Ray sustained piercing organ notes. That was good. And in the midst of the cacophony, Jim writhed on the floor, clutching the microphone to his chest, pumping his legs, alternately assuming a fetal position, and then going perfectly rigid. The music slowed. The musicians composed themselves. Jim was back on his feet. Cancel my subscription to the resurrection. Send my credentials to the house of detention. I got some friends inside. I can't remember how this goes. The face in the mirror won't stop. The girl in the window won't drop. A feast of friends alive, she cried, waiting for me outside. The last word was another scream. The music turned hypnotic. Before I sink into the deep sleep, I want to hear the scream of the butterfly. Come back, baby, back into my arms. A note of impatience entered Jim's voice, implied violence. We're getting tired of hanging around. We're getting around with our heads to the ground. The voice left violence behind, became as hypnotic as the music. I hear a very gentle sound, very near yet very far away, very soft yet very clear. Come today, come today. A mood of sadness was created, turning to anger. What have they done to the earth? What have they done to our fair sister? Ravaged and plundered and ripped her and bit her, stuck her with knives in the side of the dawn, and tied her with fences and dragged her down. There was only the rhythmic heartbeat of Ray's organ, 2 notes. Ba-bump. With the apocalyptic intrusion of drums. Ba-bump, ba-bump. I hear a very gentle sound with your ear down to the ground. Jim's face was next to the microphone, held almost lovingly in his left hand, while his right hand covered his ear. His right leg was pushed forward, bent at the knee, his foot holding the microphone stand. The left leg was rigid, poised. We want the world and we want it. We want the world and we want it. A drum roll ended. Now. Now. The drum roll ended. He leaped. He screamed, now. But now. The organ returned, full frenzy. Persian night, see the light. Save us, Jesus, save us. So when the music's over, turn out the lights. The music is your special friend. Dance on fire as it intends. Music is your only friend. until the end, until the end, until the end. Even the go-go dancer, who'd seen everybody do everything twice, sat mesmerized. Oh, I was wrong.
You were wrong.
I was wrong. Chapter 4 next. Okay, there you go. Wasn't too bad. How long was that? An hour and 10 minutes? All right, we're at page 90. All right, we're cruising right along.
Bye.
We'll see you next time.